Guards, hold this position. I ride alone. Your Majesty, we must not stray from the path.
He is close. I can feel him.
I heard something. Who are you, boy? Step forward.
I am no one, Your Majesty. And yet you already know my face.
What is this?
Do not be afraid. The pain means it is breaking.
Stay back. Do not know you. I do not know thee.
Look into my eyes and tell me I am a stranger.
Those eyes. Those are my eyes. Hey, Landy, God, what have I done? What did she do to me? What is your name, boy?
Wallace. My mother said you would know that name.
Prologue. Look into my eyes and tell me I am a stranger, the boy whispered, his voice vibrating with a power that made the Emperor's ironclad chest ache with a forgotten rhythm, like a second heartbeat he had been deaf to for 8 hollow years. The blade in Martinez's hand trembled, not because the boy was dangerous, because the boy was familiar, achingly, impossibly, furiously familiar, in a way that the potion coiled around his soul could no longer suppress. He had felt that familiarity before, in another life, pressed against a woman who smelled like rain and pine resin, who had laughed and said, "If we have a son, he will have my stubbornness and your eyes." He had forgotten that laugh, until now. The boy's eyes blazed green, not the green of leaves or jade or ordinary things, but the green of old royal magic, and of bloodlines written into the bones of mountains, of a lineage that no potion, no exile, no decade of lies had been able to extinguish. The Emperor of Ethelgard fell to his knees in the moss and wept for the first time in 8 years, and the kingdom shook with it. The kingdom of Ethelgard is a land of muffled whispers and shadowed corridors. Its stone towers reach into perpetual overcast skies, as though the kingdom itself is ashamed to be seen by the sun. The people move through their days with heads bowed, not out of humility, but out of a quiet, practiced dread. They remember what the kingdom used to feel like, when Queen Leilani walked its marble halls and flowers bloomed through the cracks in the fortress walls. They do not speak of that aloud anymore. For 8 years, the Emperor Martinez Caspian has ruled as a man hollowed out and refilled with someone else's will. He sits on the obsidian throne and he issues decrees and he attends the banquets that Gilla arranges with her cold serpent beauty. And somewhere deep inside the locked chamber of himself, the real man screams into a silence only he can hear. The people call Queen Leilani the Mad Sovereign. They say she shattered one night like glass, that grief or sorcery or simply weakness drove her howling into the dark beyond the forest's edge. They say she is dead. She is not dead. In the deep tribal forest, where healers press their palms to ancient bark and draw power from the roots of the world, a loyal woman named Elodie raised a child in secret. She raised him on truth, on history, as on the memory of a queen who was not mad but poisoned, and on the promise of a single prophecy, that the Caspian blood does not lie, that one day, beneath the right moon, the boy's eyes would light like torches. That day has come. Martinez enters the forest chasing a headache that feels, strangely, like a fist opening inside his skull. He does not know what he is hunting. He separates from his guard, drawn by an instinct Gilla's potion cannot fully smother, and walks into the ruins where a boy in commoner's wool stands in a shaft of moonlight, possessing a stillness and a regal bearing that defies every ragged thread of his clothing. The air is thick with pine and old magic. Martinez stares. The boy stares back. And in the space between them, 8 years of deception begin, at last. to crack. Chapter 1. The Veiled King. Martinez woke to the taste of honey on his tongue and the weight of a woman's hand on his chest. He did not remember falling asleep. He did not remember much of anything these days. The hours bled together like watercolors left in the rain, beautiful and formless and impossible to hold. "You were dreaming again," Gilla murmured, her voice smooth as silk stretched over a blade. She sat beside him on the edge of the bed, her hair cascading in perfect black waves over bare shoulders, her eyes watching him with the fixed intensity of a hawk circling prey. "You said a name, something. Who is she?" Martinez blinked. His skull felt heavy, like someone had filled it with wet sand. "I don't know," he said, and the words sounded true even as they tasted like ash. And he reached for her hand because that was what he always did. That was what he was supposed to do. Her fingers were cold. "You love me," she said. It was not a question. "I love you," he repeated. The words came easily, too easily. They had no weight. Downstairs, in the shadowed alcove beneath the great staircase, Lady Ivy Cisneros pressed her painted lips into a thin line and glanced at Kennedy Chambers. Kennedy, younger, sharper, a woman who wore her nobility like armor and her suspicions like jewelry, did not look away from the throne room doors. "He just stood there for an hour," Kennedy whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackle of torches, staring at the eastern wall, not speaking, not blinking, like a man made of wax. "And she stood behind him the entire time," Ivy added, and her fingers twisting the rings on her hand, a nervous habit she thought no one noticed. Touching his shoulder, whispering things we couldn't hear, and when he finally moved, he moved like she'd pulled a string. Kennedy's jaw tightened. She had served under Martinez for 6 years before Gilla arrived. She remembered the man who used to laugh so hard at the summer festivals that wine came out of his nose. The man who once carried a wounded soldier 3 miles through mud because he refused to leave anyone behind. That man had died the night Queen Leilani vanished, or so everyone believed. "I went to the archives," Kennedy said, her voice dropping even lower. "I found the marriage documents. Leilani's, I mean, the ones from before." She hesitated. Her handwriting changes halfway through the year she disappeared. It gets shaky and desperate, and there are burn marks on some of the pages, like someone tried to destroy them. Ivy went pale. "If Gilla finds out you've been looking," "She already knows." Kennedy's eyes were hard. "I saw Odin Mata outside my chambers last night, just standing there, watching." Odin Mata, Gilla's shadow, a man whose loyalty was purchased with gold and kept with fear. Ivy's stomach turned. Above them, Martinez stood at the window of his private study, his reflection ghostly in the glass. He did not remember walking here. He did not remember what day it was. But somewhere in the base of his skull, just behind his left ear, there was a sound, faint, insistent, like a child crying in a room he could not find. It had been there for weeks now, growing louder. Gilla appeared in the doorway, a goblet of wine in her hand. You haven't touched your breakfast," she said, her smile as perfect and empty as a portrait. "Are you unwell?" He turned, looked at her, tried to remember why she made his chest feel tight, why the sight of her face sent a cold spike of something, not love, not desire, but something closer to dread, down his spine. "I'm fine," he lied. She crossed the room and pressed the goblet into his hands. The wine was too sweet. It coated his teeth. He drank it anyway, because that was what he always did. "I love you," she said again, softer this time, her fingers brushing his jaw. And somewhere deep inside the prison of himself, the real Martinez Caspian beat his fists bloody against the walls and screamed a name he could no longer hear. Chapter 2. The Healer's Secret. The forest did not forgive mistakes. It swallowed the careless, the loud, the ones who believed themselves above its law. Elodie had learned this the hard way, years ago, when she'd been younger and more afraid and still believed the kingdom's walls could protect her. They couldn't. The kingdom's walls were built on lies. She knelt now in the moss beside Wallace, her hands pressed flat against the roots of an ancient oak whose bark was scarred with symbols older than the kingdom itself. Wallace, 8 years old and still small enough to be mistaken for 6, mirrored her posture exactly. Back straight, breathing slow, eyes closed. "Feel it," she murmured. "The pulse. It's there, always there, even when everything else goes quiet." Wallace's brow furrowed in concentration, and his fingers dug into the moss. Then, there, a flicker of warmth beneath his palms, like the earth had a heartbeat. His eyes flew open, green and wide and startled. "I felt it. Elodie, I felt—" "Shh." She placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but not unkind. "You'll lose it if you get excited. The magic doesn't care about your joy. It only cares that you listen." He closed his eyes again, his small chest rising and falling. This time, when the warmth came, he didn't flinch. He leaned into it, let it move through his hands and into his blood until he could feel the roots stretching beneath them, miles and miles of ancient network, whispering in a language he almost understood. "Good," Elodie said quietly. She pulled her hands back and sat on her heels. "Now tell me, who are you?" Wallace opened his eyes. Yet the green in them seemed brighter than before, though that might have been the dappled light through the canopy. "I'm nobody," he recited. "I'm a forest boy. I don't have a father." "Wrong." Her voice was sharp as a snapped branch. "You are the son of Martinez Caspian, Emperor of Ethelgard. You are the rightful heir to the Obsidian throne. And one day, you will stand before the man who should have raised you, and you will show him who you are. Now say it." Wallace's throat worked. His hands curled into fists in the moss. "I'm Wallace Caspian," he said, and his voice cracked on the name. "Son of Martinez, son of Leilani." Again. "I'm Wallace Caspian." Louder now, steadier. Again. "I'm Wallace Caspian." He was on his feet now, fists clenched, his small body vibrating with something bigger than himself. And the green in his eyes flared, just for a moment, like embers catching wind. Elodie stood, brushing moss from her knees. She was a tall woman, gaunt from years of living on roots and rainwater, but her eyes were sharp and her hands were steady. She had delivered Wallace in this forest 8 years ago, her palms slick with blood and rain, while Queen Leilani sobbed and begged her to save the child, to hide him, to keep him safe until the day the potion broke. "You'll meet him soon," Elodie said, her voice softer now. "The man in the armor, your father. He will not recognize you. He will not remember your mother's laugh or the way she used to sing you to sleep before you were even born. The poison in his blood will tell him you are a threat, and he will raise his blade." Wallace's face went very still. Will he kill me?" "No." Elodie knelt so they were eye to eye. "Because when he looks at you, truly looks, the blood will remember. It always does. And your eyes will do what they were made to do." "They'll turn green," Wallace whispered. "They'll burn green," Elodie corrected. "Like your father's did the day he first took the throne. Like your mother's did the night she bound her soul to the forest to keep you safe. The Caspian line does not break, Wallace. It bends. It hides. But it does not break." She stood and turned toward the deeper woods, where the ruins lay hidden beneath centuries of moss and vine. "Come. You need to see the place where it will happen. You need to stand in that clearing and feel it so that when the moment comes, you are not afraid." Wallace followed, his bare feet silent on the forest floor. Yet he did not ask how she knew. He had learned not to question Elodie's sight. She had dreamed every detail of his life before he lived it. The scar on his knee from falling on a stone, the way his voice would crack when he said his father's name, the exact angle of moonlight that would cut through the canopy on the night everything changed. The ruins were older than Ethelgard, older than the empire that came before it. They were made of black stone that drank light and gave back only cold. Wallace stood in the center of the clearing and tilted his head back, staring up at the trees. "He'll stand there," Elodie said, pointing to a spot 10 paces away. "And you'll stand here, and the world will hold its breath." Wallace closed his eyes. He could almost see it. The armored man, the raised blade, the moment of terrible recognition. Yet he could feel the weight of it pressing down on his chest like a hand. "What if I'm not strong enough?" he asked. Elodie's smile was sad and fierce. You're his son. You were born strong enough. Chapter 3. The Encounter. The headache came at dawn, sharp and insistent, like someone driving a nail through Martinez's left temple. He had learned to ignore pain. Battle had taught him that. But this was different. This pain had a voice. It whispered things he couldn't quite hear, names that dissolved the moment he tried to catch them. I'm going hunting, he announced at breakfast, pushing away the plate of food he hadn't touched. Gilla's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed just slightly, the way a cat's do before it pounces. You hate hunting, she said lightly, her fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass. You haven't gone in years. Had he hated it? He couldn't remember. Everything before Gilla felt like a story someone else had told him, the details blurred and uncertain. I need air, he said, and the words felt true even though he didn't know why. She watched him go with that fixed smile, and Martinez felt the weight of her gaze like a hand on the back of his neck all the way to the stables. The hunting party was small, 6 guards, 2 hounds, and Captain Varro, who had served under Martinez since before the madness took Leilani. Varro didn't speak much anymore. None of the old guard did. They moved through the kingdom like ghosts, their loyalty worn thin by years of watching their king become a stranger. They rode east into the forest where the old pines grew so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground. The headache pulsed in time with his heartbeat, growing louder with each mile. And then, movement. A flash of something pale between the trees. Your Majesty, wait, Varro started. But Martinez had already dismounted, his boots sinking into the soft moss. The pain in his skull was unbearable now, a high whining note that made his vision blur at the edges. He pushed through low-hanging branches, thorns catching at his cloak, and stumbled into a clearing he didn't remember being there before. The boy stood in the center, impossibly still. Martinez froze. His hand went to his sword hilt, instinct, but he didn't draw, couldn't draw, because the boy was staring at him with eyes that were too old for his face, and Martinez knew those eyes. He knew the shape of that jaw, the set of those shoulders, the way the boy held himself like he was bracing for a blow but refusing to flinch. He knew because he'd seen that exact stance in the mirror every morning for 38 years. Who are you? The words came out rough, half strangled. Martinez took a step forward and the boy didn't move, didn't blink, just watched him with a kind of patient sorrow that made something crack open in Martinez's chest, something that had been locked and buried and forgotten. I'm nobody, the boy said quietly. His voice was clear, steady, nothing like the trembling fear Martinez expected from a child alone in the woods. Just a forest boy. Liar, Martinez's mind hissed. The word came from somewhere deep, somewhere the potion hadn't reached yet. He took another step. The boy tilted his head, and the movement was so achingly familiar that Martinez felt his knees go weak. Your face, Martinez whispered. His hand rose without his permission, reaching toward the boy as if to confirm he was real. I know your face. The boy's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or recognition, or the terrible weight of a secret too big to carry alone. Do you? He asked, and the question hung in the air between them like smoke. Martinez's vision swam. The headache spiked so violently he staggered, catching himself against a tree. And in that moment of white-hot agony, he saw her, Leilani, laughing in sunlight, her hand on her belly, saying, If we have a son, he'll have your stubborn jaw and my eyes, and God help us both. No, Martinez gasped, pressing his palms against his temples. No, she's dead. She went mad. She loved you, the boy said, and his voice was so gentle it felt like a knife. She still does. Martinez looked up, and tears streaming down his face, though he didn't remember starting to cry. The boy was closer now, close enough to touch, and Martinez could see every detail. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the dirt under his fingernails, the way his chest rose and fell with each careful breath. He looked like a ghost. He looked like a memory. He looked like... Your Majesty! Varro crashed through the trees, sword drawn, his face pale. Step away from the boy. Now. The boy didn't run. He just looked at Martinez one last time, and in that look was a promise. I'll be here. When you're ready, I'll be here. Then he turned and melted into the forest like smoke, leaving Martinez on his knees in the moss, shaking, his heart beating a rhythm he'd forgotten it knew. Chapter 4. The Poisoned Cup. Gilla knew the moment Martinez returned that something had broken. He moved differently, slower, more cautious, like a man testing the strength of ice before crossing a frozen lake. His eyes, usually so vacant and compliant, held a flicker of something sharp, something awake. She smiled and kissed his cheek and asked about the hunt, and he lied smoothly, but his hands shook when he reached for his wine. She saw it. She saw everything. That night, after Martinez had fallen into a restless sleep, Gilla descended into the east tower where Ricky Whitehead kept his workshop. The door was warded with symbols that made most people's eyes slide away, but Gilla walked through them like they were cobwebs. Ricky owed her everything, his position, his reputation, his life. He would not refuse. Yet he was hunched over a workbench when she entered, grinding something dark and oily in a mortar. He didn't look up. "It's holding, isn't it?" he said, his voice reedy and defensive. "I told you the dosage was perfect. 3 drops in his wine every morning, 2 at night. He shouldn't be—" "He saw something," Gilla interrupted, her voice cold as winter stone. "In the forest. And now he's dreaming." Ricky's hands stilled. He turned slowly, his face pale beneath the grime. He was a small man, ferret-thin, with eyes that darted and fingers that never stopped moving. A brilliant alchemist, a coward. Dreaming is normal. The potion suppresses memory, not— "He said a name," Gilla said, and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "In his sleep. He said Leilani." The color drained completely from Ricky's face. "That's not possible! The binding should have— Make it stronger." She moved closer, and Ricky pressed back against his workbench like a trapped animal. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care if it burns through him. I need him locked down." "My lady, if I increase the potency, there's a risk of—" "I didn't ask about risks." Her smile was all teeth. "Do it. Tonight. I want it ready by morning." She left him trembling in the dark, his hands already reaching for jars of things that had no business being mixed. Ricky Whitehead was many things: a poisoner, a liar, a man who sold his conscience for gold. But he was not stupid. He knew what Gilla was. He knew what she'd done to the queen. And he knew that if he refused her now, he'd be found floating face down in the castle moat by sunrise. So he worked. Yet he ground bone and belladonna and something black that writhed in the mortar like it was still alive. He whispered words in a language that made his throat bleed. And when the dawn came, pale and cold, he had what she wanted: a draft 3 times as strong, dark as tar, that smelled like rotting flowers. Gilla brought it to Martinez herself, mixed into his morning wine. She watched him raise the goblet to his lips, her heart beating slow and steady. He hesitated, just for a moment, his hand hovering at his mouth. His eyes were distant, unfocused, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. "Drink," she said softly, placing her hand over his. "You look so tired, my love. This will help." He tilted the cup. The wine touched his lips. And then, a flash. Green light. Blinding. Not in the room. In his mind. A boy's face. And eyes blazing like emeralds on fire. A voice saying, look at me, and remember." Martinez's hand spasmed. The goblet fell, shattering on the marble floor, red wine spreading like blood. He staggered backward, gasping, his hands clawing at his chest as if trying to rip something out from under his ribs. "Martinez!" Gilla's voice was sharp with panic. Real panic, for the first time in 8 years. She grabbed his shoulders, but he shoved her away with a strength that sent her stumbling. "Get away from me," he snarled, and his voice, God, his voice was his own again, raw and ragged and real. "What did you do to me? What did you—" He collapsed, his body convulsing once, twice, before going still. Gilla stood over him, her chest heaving, her perfect facade cracked just enough to show the thing beneath. She looked at the spilled wine, the shattered glass, the man on the floor who was starting to remember. "Odin!" she called, her voice steady again, cold again. The door opened immediately. Odin Mata stepped inside, his face expressionless. Lock him in his chambers, no visitors, no food or drink unless I bring it myself, and find out what he saw in that forest. Odin nodded and hauled Martinez's unconscious body over his shoulder like a sack of grain. Gilla stood alone in the spilled wine and broken glass, her hands clenched into fists. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. The throne was hers, the kingdom was hers, and she would burn every forest in Ethelgard to ash before she let a dead queen's ghost take it back. Chapter 5. The Green Awakening. The full moon rose like a burning eye over the forest, and Elodie knew before she saw the smoke that Gilla had made her move. She grabbed Wallace by the shoulders, her grip tight enough to bruise. "They're coming for you, for us. We need to run." But Wallace was staring past her, into the dark between the trees, his face eerily calm. "No," he said quietly. "He's coming. I can feel him." "Wallace, listen to me." He broke free. The boy's voice was strange, distant, like he was speaking from somewhere far away. "The potion shattered. He's coming to find me, and she's coming to stop him." Elodie's blood ran cold. In the distance, she heard the thunder of hooves, the clank of armor, the crack of torches being lit. She pulled Wallace toward the ruins. If they were going to make a stand, and it would be on ground that remembered the old magic, where the Caspian blood had power. They reached the clearing just as the riders burst through the trees. Gilla was at the front, her face a mask of cold fury, flanked by Odin Mata and a dozen soldiers. And behind them, stumbling, barely able to stay on his horse, Martinez. His wrists were bound, his face was bruised, but his eyes, God, his eyes were clear. "There," Gilla hissed, pointing at Wallace. "The forest demon, the creature that's been poisoning the Emperor's mind. Kill it!" Odin dismounted, drawing his sword. Wallace didn't move. Elodie stepped in front of him, but the boy gently pushed her aside. "No," he said. "This is mine." Martinez slid off his horse and fell to his knees, his bound hands clawing at the dirt. "Don't," he gasped, his voice wrecked. "Don't touch him. And I know him. I know—" He looked up, and his eyes locked with Wallace's, and the air between them crackled with something old and inevitable. "He's a child, Martinez," Gilla said, her voice syrupy with false concern. "A feral forest child who's been whispering lies in your ear. You're not well. I need you to shut your lying mouth," Martinez snarled, and the words came out raw and jagged, like they'd been torn from his chest. "I remember. God help me, I remember everything." From the edge of the clearing, hidden in shadow, Queen Rojas of the Southern Territories watched with cold, calculating eyes. She had come to Ethelgard under the guise of diplomacy, but everyone knew she was here to measure the kingdom's weakness, to see if the rumors of the mad emperor were true. She had expected a spectacle. Oh, she had not expected this. Gilla's face twisted. "Odin, now!" Odin moved fast, his blade aimed at Wallace's heart, but the boy didn't flinch. He just looked up at the moon, that burning, ancient moon, and closed his eyes. And when he opened them, green, blazing, brilliant, impossible green. Not the green of leaves or grass or any living thing, but the green of power, of bloodlines that ran deeper than the roots of mountains, of magic that had been sleeping and was now awake. The light exploded outward in a wave that sent Odin staggering backward, his sword falling from nerveless fingers. The soldiers' horses reared and screamed. The ancient stones beneath their feet began to hum, their surfaces glowing with the same emerald fire that poured from Wallace's eyes. Martinez felt it like a physical blow, the last threads of Gilla's poison snapping inside his chest, burning away like cobwebs in flame. He gasped, doubling over as 8 years of stolen memories came flooding back all at once. Leilani's laugh, the weight of her head on his shoulder, the way she'd cried when she told him she was pregnant, the way she'd looked at him the night she disappeared, her eyes full of terror and love and a desperate, silent plea. "Protect our son." "No," Gilla whispered, her perfect composure finally cracking. "No, this isn't possible. You're nobody. You're nothing." "I'm Wallace Caspian," the boy said, and his voice rang out clear and strong, amplified by the power thrumming through the stones. Son of Martinez, son of Leilani, heir to the obsidian throne. Yes, and I have come to take back what was stolen. The green light pulsed once more, so bright it turned night into day, and then faded, leaving Wallace standing in the center of the clearing, his small chest heaving, his eyes still glowing faintly in the dark. Martinez broke. The last of the chains shattered and he lurched forward, his bound hands reaching for his son. Wallace, he choked out, and the name felt like salvation. Wallace, I'm sorry, I'm so... Wallace ran to him, just ran, like any child would run to their father, and threw his arms around Martinez's neck, and Martinez held him, really held him, for the first time in 8 years, his face buried in his son's hair, his whole body shaking with sobs he couldn't control. From the shadows, Queen Rojas smiled. This changed everything. The old emperor was back. Yes, and he had an heir. Gillis screamed, a sound of pure animal rage, and lunged for them. But Ivy Cisneros stepped out of the trees, sword drawn, with Kennedy Chambers and half the palace guard behind her. It's over, Gilla, Ivy said quietly. We've been waiting for this night. We've been ready. Odin looked at Gilla, looked at the soldiers surrounding them, and slowly, deliberately, he dropped to one knee. Forgive me, Your Majesty, he said, and he was looking at Martinez now, not Gilla. I was a coward. I followed the wrong master. One by one, the soldiers knelt. The forest held its breath, and Gilla, beautiful, venomous Gilla, stood alone in the moonlight, her empire of lies crumbling around her like ash. Chapter 6. The Return of the Queen. They found Leilani 3 days later, deep in the heart of the Healer's Forest, in a grove where the trees grew so ancient their roots formed rooms beneath the earth. She was kneeling by a pool of still water, her hands submerged to the wrists, her face gaunt and tired but no longer haunted. The madness, the curse Gilla had woven into her mind, had been transferred into the forest itself, absorbed by the trees and the earth until nothing remained but the woman she had always been. Martinez stood at the edge of the grove and forgot how to breathe. She looked up slowly, as if she'd been expecting him. Her hair was longer, streaked with silver now. That her eyes, those impossible green eyes Wallace had inherited, were clear and bright and full of something that made Martinez's chest crack open all over again. Leilani, he whispered, and the name came out broken, barely a sound. She stood, water dripping from her fingers, and took one step toward him, then another, and then she was running, and he was running, and they collided in the center of the grove with enough force to knock the breath from both of them. He caught her, his arms wrapping around her like he could hold her inside his ribcage where she belonged, and she buried her face in his neck and sobbed. I'm sorry, Martinez gasped into her hair, his voice raw. I'm so sorry. I couldn't remember. I tried, I swear I tried, but she... Shh. Leilani's hands cupped his face. That's her thumbs wiping away tears. He didn't know he was crying. I know. I know what she did. And I know you fought it. I could feel you fighting even from here. Every day. Every single day. Wallace, Martinez choked out. Our son. He's... I know. She laughed, and it was the sound of bells and birdsong and every good thing Martinez had forgotten existed. Elodie told me. His eyes turned green, just like you said they would. Martinez pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands trembling as they traced the lines of her face. Older now, marked by years of exile and grief, but still her. Still the woman who'd made him believe in magic before he ever saw a spell cast. I love you, he said, and the words felt real in a way they hadn't in 8 years. God, Leilani, I love you so much it's killing me. Then live, she whispered, as pressing her forehead to his. Live with me. Raise our son with me. Take back your kingdom. And let's make them remember what it means to love an emperor who isn't afraid to feel. They returned to the palace together, hand in hand, with Wallace between them. The people lined the streets in silence at first, unsure of what they were seeing, their mad queen, their poisoned king, their impossible heir. And then someone started to clap, and then another. And then the whole kingdom erupted, cheering and weeping and throwing flowers at their feet. Gilla was brought before them in chains, her beauty dimmed, her power stripped. She looked at Martinez with eyes full of venom and disbelief. "You were mine," she hissed. "I owned you. How did you—" "You owned a ghost," Martinez said quietly. Wallace's small hand gripped tight in his own. You never touched the man. And you never understood that some things, blood, love, truth, they don't break. They bend, they hide, but they don't break. Gilla was exiled to the northern wastes, where the cold was sharp enough to cut and the nights lasted months. Odin Mata, given a choice between execution and redemption, chose to serve the crown guard for the rest of his days, his loyalty now bound by shame and a desperate need to atone. Ricky Whitehead vanished in the night, and no one searched too hard to find him. Queen Rojas stayed for the coronation, not of Martinez, who had never truly lost his throne, but of Wallace, who was formally recognized as crown prince before the entire court. She watched the boy stand on the dais, his green eyes blazing with quiet confidence, and she thought, "This is a kingdom that will not fall, and not with that blood on the throne." That night, when the palace finally quieted and the celebrations faded to embers, Martinez sat in the royal chambers with Leilani beside him and Wallace asleep between them, his small hand curled around his father's thumb. The moon shone through the window, silver and soft, and for the first time in 8 years, Martinez felt like he could breathe. "He looks like you," Leilani whispered, her fingers combing gently through Wallace's dark hair. "He has your eyes," Martinez said. "He has both of us." She smiled, and it was the smile that had made Martinez fall in love with her 15 years ago in a garden full of white roses. "And that means he's unstoppable." Martinez kissed her temple and closed his eyes. Finally at peace. The truth had burned through the lies, and the blood had remembered, and the kingdom of Ethelgard, which had spent 8 years in shadow, was waking up to the light. Truth and identity are not things that can be granted or taken away by others. They are inherent lights that will eventually burn through even the darkest deceptions. The Kingdom of Ethelgard. See you in our next episode.